Okay, awesome. All right, so I'm going to put it in presentation mode. So again, thanks for the invite to Mary, Professor Betts. And as we discussed, I'm going to just cover 3 topics: quick introduction on me, a little on career to date, and some of the sort of key takeaways from my perspective. Some thoughts on finance as a career today, some of the new dynamics in the function. And then Professor Betts asked me to chat a little bit about the key challenges in U.S. pharma, keep it out of the political realm, but how we sort of navigate, macro, micro changes to the operating environment. So I'll go into that a little bit as well. So the first one is just career today learning. So first of all, yeah, I'm the CFO for Novartis Pharma US. I'm based in East Hanover, New Jersey. Married. I got 2 children, probably about the same age as some of the people here tonight. University age, both kids in school. I've been a member of the Silberman Advisory Board for about 2 years, I think. And right now I'm working from home, and that's my summer and winter view out of the office. It's a pretty nice view in the summer. So I'm up on Prince Edward Island, Canada, but it's a bit isolated now in winter. So it's probably not the most coveted place to be working from, but it brings focus, I'll tell you that, because there's not much else to do except be cold. So I put this together. I had an engagement with my undergrad school, McMaster University. They asked me to put career on a page. So this is what I did for them. It's a little bit exhausting, but it starts in the bottom left corner, and I'll just kind of walk you through the path and maybe what's unique about me and what I sort of learned along the way. So I graduated from McMaster University with a degree in business, and I went to work in the automotive industry for 3 years. Which was a really great experience, really operational, and got a lot of responsibility early there. So I was sort of running a factory by the time I was, 2 years out of school, negotiating with General Motors and Ford and Chrysler, a lot of traveling around the Detroit metro area on contracts and things like that. Really fresh out of school. So it was nerve-wracking, but it was really great development for me. And then I made a change into pharma in Pharma Canada. Started as an ERP project leader, worked my way through cost accounting, and it was eventually the CFO and site leader for Novartis Canada. And along the way, I did CPIM, which is a certification inventory production management, and I knocked off my CPA designation. So I continued to sort of take school as a part of my professional development. And around that time, or early of the 90s, I had an opportunity to go to the US. That's the flag of New Jersey for anybody that's interested. To be group controller for Novartis Consumer Health US, which is some of the manufacturing sites in the US. And so had that role for about 3 years, a lot of complexity, still very operational, which I think you see in the early part of my career was sort of a differentiator for me. And we did a lot of sort of factory network optimization, plant closings, integrations, and things like that. So it was really important work for the company, and it was really quite a good learning as well for myself. Around 2000, I got an opportunity to move to Switzerland. So I got the pleasure of working out of Geneva, Switzerland, which was amazing. And had 2 roles there. I was the business unit CFO for the nutrition business, and also I was the supply chain head for the consumer health division. And those little flame out symbols I've got here, sort of industry change, merger, divest, just a way for me to try to kind of capture, some of the tumultuous experience or kind of key learning experiences I had. So we divested a bunch of the nutrition businesses that Novartis had back the earlier part of the 2000s as the company began to focus more and more as a kind of a pure play pharma company and less of a conglomerate. Few years later, I got my real first sizable CFO role, which was for the Novartis OTC business. We headquartered it in Jersey, in Parsippany, and I had that role for about 5 years. Really interesting role for me. It was it's a difficult low growth industry. So we worked a lot on branding, on portfolio expansion. We did a couple of acquisitions. We bought Excedrin and some of the old Bristol Myers brands. And we built a really, really strong track record there. Went from sort of the worst performing OTC business to one of the better ones on the globe. And it was my first real global job. So I got to kind of oversee R&D and did a lot of travel. Middle of 2000, so about 2007, I was asked to go down to Atlanta, Georgia, and be the CFO for the CBvision business, which is the contact lens business of Novartis at the time. And that is the Georgia flag there. And did that role for about 5 years. It was a very, very challenging role. Company was really struggling. Supply chain had a number of recalls and quality incidents. It was really not growing. It really was low profitability and really kind of a mess, frankly. And I would say it wasn't really the most coveted job in the company at the time, but I decided to take it after I met some of the management team and met some of the scientists there. Really felt that they had like really winning technology. And so I thought they really had a right to win, and just sort of needed some help and tried to play my role there. So I really call that sort of a turnaround experience. And we were really successful, actually. We turned the company around, and actually kind of Novartis recommitted to eye care and ended up acquiring more eye care assets when they bought Alcon Labs, closed in about 2011, based in Texas, in Fort Worth. Along the way, I did a little bit more education. I did a lot of executive education at Harvard. Very lucky that Novartis had a program there. Did the CMA. And in around 2014, I did this organizational leadership and development program at Gonzaga. Great basketball team, pretty good school, out in Spokane, Washington, sort of in a secondment framework. At Alcon, so I moved to Dallas. You see, I moved quite a lot along the way. Moved to Dallas, and we integrated CBvision and Alcon together, and then into Novartis, and sort of built this eye care division. And that went well. It was a bit of a choppy time. The business was, I think, struggling to continue to grow on the Alcon side, whereas the contact lens business was still doing really well. And around 2014, I decided that sort of had enough of Texas, and I was looking for a kind of a fresh opportunity. So I actually left Novartis and went to AstraZeneca. And it was right around the time that Pfizer was trying to acquire AstraZeneca. So they were really under a hostile takeover and had repelled that. And their mission was to stay as an independent company and turn around the business and deal with a very large patent cliff and launch a bunch of new medicines, all of this sort of simultaneously. So a really challenging set of circumstances. And that's the flag of Delaware, by the way, the blue one. And I had worked with some great people there. And we had a really interesting run for about 3 years where we sort of revamped the business, converted it from being sort of this big primary care mega brand machine to a really agile specialty company, launching oncology and specialty drugs. And really, the company's still doing really well today. My boss there at the time had left and gone to Novartis, and sort of convinced me to rejoin. And so I rejoined Novartis in 2017, and that's where I am now. And that's sort of the career story. When I look at it through sort of a retrospective lens, and I have this slide from Lominger International from Korn Ferry, I guess I come to the realization that, from a textbook standpoint, I really hit a number of the examples of developmental moves that Lominger points out. So I had a chance to move across divisions, through some fix-its and turnarounds, some roles that had new heavy strategic demands, influencing without authority, international assignments, big projects, jumps in scale, and some significant sort of people demands. I never really did a startup, so that wouldn't really apply to me. But in retrospect, early part of my career and along the way, I really sort of gravitated towards these sort of challenging functional roles that have been really great for me professionally. So key learnings, excuse me. Sort of taking on new first-time conditions for me personally really helped me grow my skill base, my experience, my confidence. And I say to people that I work with, like, the earlier you get exposed to some of these challenges, these difficulties, the better it is for you. And like a wholesale change, like, take yourself out of your safe zone, and like, it's a new country, a business, a team, sort of with no safety net, and like, for sure helps you bring a lot of focus on what you're doing. And it's a real must to keep learning and growing. And, as we think about finance today and traditionally, I honestly believe that some career differentiation is really a real big asset. And for me, it was this operational interest or intrigue by how things sort of operate. And then the last two things, good bosses are so important. I had some really great mentors and bosses along the way, and huge support from my wife and family. So I'm going to pause there and see if there might be a question or two. I don't know, Mary or Paige.
Students, any questions? We're up to 57, which is awesome. Any questions, anyone?
Hopefully not too much and too fast.
I think they're still warming up. Pat Koza, Ken Betts, anything? Oh, here we go. Okay. How has getting your CPA license helped your professional career?
Yeah, interesting. I think the credential is highly valued. I wouldn't say it really did so much for me professionally. I think, it would be a credible asset if I were sort of a public company CFO, but I've sort of been focused in on being sort of divisional CFO. So we've always had a really strong sort of corporate accounting group that's taking care of things. But I would say it's a great credential, depending on which avenue you're going for.
Great. Thank you.
In retrospect, probably the CFA would have been better.
We're starting a CFA club, so students, listen to what John said.
Yeah, no, it's a great credential. It's so rigorous and very applicable for now, I think.
Absolutely. Could not agree more. Any other questions before John continues? All right, carry on. We'll let them warm up.
All right, perfect. So for my team and I at Novartis, we feel we're trying to maintain and build a very dynamic finance function. And so we're always checking ourselves sort of outside in on, how we're doing, what are the big trends happening. And, in terms of critical finance skills for the era we're in now, I think there's some real big differences that are important to consider. So traditionally, finance people have been great at numbers and good problem solvers, have mostly focused on sort of historical analysis of a business, a little bit risk averse, very systematic and rigorous. Technical skills on the accounting side, but not necessarily on the computer or on the data side. We've had an explosion of opportunity with data and data science in the past 5 years. Even the ERP system and the things we've implemented over the decades at Novartis haven't even scratched the surface in terms of the ability to kind of generate real meaningful data. But that's all changed now. So like I have on my phone, I've got daily sales, I've got market share. I have more data on my phone from how Novartis is performing than we used to have in the entire computer system. And so with that comes the reality that the finance person whose currency used to be sort of showing up at the meeting with the numbers and explaining that to people, that's already being done for you. So my boss already has the sales numbers, the P&L, all the operational information even before I show up. So that's not my job anymore. My job is not to show up with the numbers. My job is to make meaning out of them and to look forward. And so some of the skills there some advanced data visualization, rethinking the business model through data, pushing and reaching into the commercial business and looking into the future, much more important than looking at the past. And so the behaviors and skills that we're trying to grow for our team are a little bit different, right? So it's a lot about bringing information and analytics to try to influence others. There's a lot of behavioral dynamics in a business. And so we're really looking for the finance team to sort of make sense of things, be great communicators, be comfortable with ambiguity, be strategic thinkers, and be able to kind of knit together the story of what's happening. And so these are really different skills than has traditionally been present in finance people. And, some people are calling these essential human skills or essential human life skills, but this is a slide that sort of captures those, right? So communication, strategic thinking, the ability to be analytical, and then this whole intellectual curiosity and self-awareness, these are just super important now. It's really not sufficient for the finance person to show up with a kind of controller headset on and say, hey, this is risky, we shouldn't do it. We're really looking for finance people to come into meetings and engagements with people with a solution focus. And that means taking some risk with the business, but kind of owning the results and the initiatives alongside our business partners. It might sound a little bit simple, but it's a big departure from the past, where accounting and finance people could kind of distance themselves from business operations and results and, just kind of stick to their knitting and make sure things are accurate. It's really sort of insufficient now. And so it's a shift. Whereas people may gravitate to finance and accounting to be in a solid profession, I think it's inevitable that you're going to get involved in complicated business matters where you're going to be expected to contribute. So really encouraging people who build their careers or to in education to pursue training and problem solving, decision making, sort of data modeling along the way, along with sort of these life skills of being able to be communicative and sort of put yourself out there. The next couple of slides are something that I found really interesting from the corporate executive board. So the print's a little bit small, but the typical finance team is really strong at sort of learning and doing in the current environment, but not so strong as sort of persuader competencies, strategist competencies, and builder competencies. But on the flip side, the competencies that matters most to CEOs and to the board are the opposite. So the most important competencies are unfortunately in the shortest supply. And this really resonates with me, it resonates with our team, because it sort of means that the traditional finance education is focused on the left side of this schematic here. And that educational institutions and individuals really need to sort of look at themselves and focus in on the communication, the agility, and the curiosity part of the equation for both education and career building. And then what that means for careers is that everything's just not sort of one way up. It is really important to think about opportunities as experience and skill building, and it's sometimes a little bit like the picture on the right, that you'll take a job for the skill and the experience, but it might not be a promotion per se, but you're going to be building a much deeper, much more valuable skill set. And ultimately, it's the value and the breadth of this skill set that's going to kind of propel your career up. And you can't just think about it as being going from analyst to senior analyst to manager to et cetera, but sort of what you've learned and what you can apply in future more complicated roles. Inside of Novartis Finance, we've made this pledge that we're going to move aggressively from focusing on planning and reporting, which roughly is about 80% of what everybody does now, and 20% on decision support, to 80% on decision support, and 20% on planning and reporting. And we're going to do that and are doing that from simplifying our operations, automating, bringing some digitization to things. I mentioned the phone. I've got a ton of information on that. I don't need people generating reports and dropping them on my desk. And then upskilling our people. And that's mostly investing in the skills I've described already. So general business skills, communication skills, persuasion skills, and more broader education on the business to be able to add value, because finance people bring a tremendous skill set to problems and issues and opportunities, and it's needed. And I think we're just trying our best to kind of unleash those people on the business, because it's a real need. Traditional sort of management educations sort of stop a little short of being analytical, and the finance team can really add a lot of value here. So that's a little bit of a flavor, a teaser of what we're trying to do in Novartis. And we made a pretty strong statement saying we're going to move there by 2022. So that's only 1 year away. And so, we put that out there with our team, and we're measuring progress against that. And, we're doing our best to prepare to sort of be leaders in this new era. So I'm going to also pause there, see if there's any questions on any of that.
We do have a couple of questions in the chat. A question from an anonymous attendee is, what are the biggest challenges that you have faced while working at Novartis?
Biggest challenges? I would say it's a big company. It's not always agile. And so we have a lot of levels. And getting things done quickly is not always the easiest thing to do. So I'd say that's a big challenge. That was kind of a softball question. You guys can do better than that.
Absolutely. We have a question from Mark Morante. Mark, do you want to come up and ask your question directly? I promoted Mark if he wants to ask this question directly.
Oh, right. Thank you so much. Yes, I have a question. Will having a background in computer science help in a consideration in an analytics role? And also, how much should a candidate know?
So I didn't hear that last part. I heard the computer science piece. How much, what should the candidate know?
How much math should a candidate know?
Okay. So first of all, I think computer science is very relevant. We are seeing a much different profile for finance people. I have people with undergrads in physics, chemistry, computer science. I find it's a fantastic fit for the work we're doing. And I think, I don't think people need to be mathematicians. In the end, not to belittle the accountants among us, myself included, we're good at math, but we're not, it's not like we're splitting the atom every day in math. It's pretty basic math. And so I think even if you don't have a strong accounting background, you can learn on the job enough of the math, as long as you're a good process thinker, which most computer people are.
Awesome. Great answer. Any other questions? All right, let's carry on, and we'll give them a few minutes to think.
Yeah, perfect. Okay, so the U.S. pharma industry, or the pharma industry in general, is obviously an interesting place to be, and it falls in and out of favor. It's a bit in favor now, since the industry is battling COVID and has done some amazing work on the vaccines, I think. And so, depending on the administration or the tone in society, some of the challenges are consistent, or some of them are new. So, if we look at the industry really at this point in time, I'd say we are in an era of incredible breakthrough innovation. I was in this class at Harvard a couple of years back, and somebody I used to play hockey with in Atlanta texted me and said that his son, who had leukemia, was just cured by Novartis's Kymriah drug. Like, we're talking a cure of leukemia where, you know, I knew Connor for many years, and he, you know, had several sessions of chemo, was given last rites once, and his parents were struggling with the fact that they're probably going to lose their child at some point. And, you know, this industry is curing, you know, incredible illnesses with science and technology at a rate that's just hasn't been seen, I don't think, before in the industry. So it's in a super exciting time for innovation. Still, there's significant challenges remaining. You know, I think the US healthcare system, we have to admit, is horrendously inefficient overall. You know, it's high cost for all participants, and really our outcomes are not where they need to be. So we pay more for everything, and our outcomes aren't as good as other nations. And so, you know, this needs some serious rework. Inside the system, we have misaligned incentives. It's very rare where somebody's making a decision based on the end-to-end patient benefit as opposed to the benefit of their organization, whether it's the hospital or the payer or the manufacturer. And then patients aren't getting the medicine they need. So, you know, we work hard to help physicians understand our medications and see if it's an appropriate fit for a patient. And then for every 100 prescriptions, you know, 40% of the scripts, they don't even fill them. They don't even show up or don't bother. Or when they do fill the prescription, and this is even for life-saving medicines, they drop off the medication after 9 months. That's the average, 9 to 10 months. And so those four things, that's been consistent for the last decade. And so it's a very inefficient system when companies are spending a lot of money to do research, are spending a lot of money to do medical education and marketing, and then patients aren't getting the medicines they need, and then they're dropping off too early. And so, you know, especially for chronic illnesses or serious illnesses, you see hospitalization rates where we don't need a hospitalization if the person was still on the medication. So the system cost is huge. So you have that, which is an intractable, very difficult problem to solve that nobody has really systematically tackled yet. And then you add some legislation policy changes that would, you know, further complicate that. So inside Novartis, we are very interested to help solve these 4 bullet points. It's really difficult to find somebody on the other side of the conversation to work with, frankly. We do some things. We do a lot on patient services, on drug programs, but these are really some things that we really want to contribute to solve. But you know, we need a broader coalition to do so. In terms of you know, what might happen with the new administration, this is you know, what Professor Betts asked me to sort of lay out. These are some of the things that we think are most likely to be considered. So expanding the Affordable Care Act, or creating some kind of partial public option that may be a reality in the coming years. We think there's going to be probably some additional tax credits for working Americans to kind of lower drug costs. So Medicaid, so that is coverage for low-income Americans might get expanded, and then Medicare is for senior citizens. The age might be lowered. So that would actually be, I think, a positive. It would get more people covered. Market concentration across the healthcare system. So there's been a proliferation of takeovers and consolidations in the payer community. So 3 or 4 payers are sort of managing the whole thing. And we know that that's not necessarily a good thing. There's a lot of variety in pharma. I think the biggest pharma company only has sort of 4% market share. So it's not like anybody's has cornered the market on drugs. But inside the system, there's a lot of concentration. I think the government wants to partner with companies to work directly to try to lower costs and improve outcomes. We'll probably see more aggressive negotiations by the government buyer, which I think makes sense as well. A hot topic would be a cap on new drug prices, and then subsequent price increase limitations, which, especially the second part, I think is a bit overdue. And you know, for non-innovative medicines, it's I think not responsible to be taking price increases. And the first part, new cap on drug prices, I think those should be guided by the value of the drug, the R&D effort, and the system cost that gets saved. But that's a complicated discussion as well. And then more bluntly, there could be a limitation on deductible market expenses. So a lot of people don't like drug ads. I don't really like them either. So we could make those non-tax deductible to see if we can curtail those. And then the last one, allow consumers to buy drugs from other countries. That one's been hanging around for a while. It's kind of a non-starter. I'm living in Canada for the last few months. The Canadian government doesn't want Americans buying their drugs in Canada because of their risk of supply issues here. So I don't see that one as being legitimate or really helping anything. The first few, I think, would be more likely. And then in terms of, you know, what do we try to do to combat this or to navigate this? First focus is on innovation. If you have high efficacy medicines that treat unmet needs, ideally a cure or best-in-class molecule, then a lot of these issues are a bit secondary. We would think that you know, physicians would gravitate to the best treatment, and we can talk about pricing and economics, et cetera, but eventually we'll figure all that out. But I think it's the sort of the Me Too lower tier products that are burdening the system, and we should be encouraging paying for innovation, because ultimately that's what we're trying to solve as a society, as an industry. We for sure put patients first, spend a lot of resources on helping people get access, providing patient support services and compliance. Novartis has been giving malaria drugs for free for more than 15 years, I think, across Asia. Our patient services work in the US for underprivileged people or indigent populations is extremely generous and fair. We're pretty alert to policy changes, but we don't really try to change our business model. You know, you can jerk your business model back and forth depending on Republicans or Democrats, but ultimately, if you run a highly ethical, innovative, focused business, you price responsibly, and you're agile, I think you can sort of navigate any change. And we're still more interested in trying to solve the broader issues that face the industry, as opposed to sort of, you know, adapting to a set of legislations or, you know, those types of risks. So I know the industry is, you know, sometimes misunderstood, vilified in some cases, but I can tell you from working in it, it's a really dynamic industry. It makes you feel great when you know that what you're doing is helping patients live better lives. And I can tell you that at least inside our company, there isn't 5 minutes that go by without talking about a patient or an opportunity. You know, this winter storm, we've had a ton of disruption. We've shipped free at-risk medicines to a bunch of different states and patients. It's not even a second thought. So it's a real privilege to work in the industry and for the company, and love to be part of some of the discussions to sort of solve some of these big problems, because climate change and access to medicine are probably the two biggest issues, you know, we face as a species. And I'd rather be doing this than working anywhere else. So take a pause there. Happy to take any questions. I know that Professor Betts said you had some macroeconomic students in. Happy to answer anything on that as well.
We actually have a couple of brave students that want to ask you a live question.
Perfect.
I am going to call up Jasper. Jasper, if you could turn on your camera and ask John your question.
For some reason, I cannot turn on my camera, but my question is about the prescription drugs. So prescription drugs are getting more expensive over the years, and some of them cost more than $120,000. Are pharmaceutical companies going to do something to at least lower the cost? I think tax credits are a great idea, but are they also trying to lower the retail prices of these prescription drugs?
Yeah, so pretty much most of the major companies do patient assistance programs that kick in at certain family income levels. So I can't say that, I know that a lot of the oncology drugs are super expensive, and that's sort of a function of large R&D costs and relatively small patient populations. And so the company sort of does the math, spent, sort of $3-4 billion to develop this drug, and there might only be 3,000 patients a year. And you have a patent for, maybe 12 to 15 years. And so the math is that's a pretty expensive drug. Yeah, so there is a lot of patient assistance based on income level. But I think the bigger piece is the other drugs for more chronic conditions in categories like diabetes, respiratory, they need to be way cheaper. I think there's probably an equilibrium of probably society needs to recognize that new innovative therapies cost money to develop, and that we should at least cover that development cost so we can perpetuate the model. But drugs that are in the market for a long time, they shouldn't be going up in price. I think that's the key issue. If you really look at where the spending is, it's in these big chronic drugs. The headline is always the cancer medication that's $140,000 a year. But if you look at 30 million people on diabetes drugs, that's a huge burden.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, it's a great question.
That was Jasper. Thank you. Next, Lily has a question. Lily, you can turn your camera on and you can ask John your question.
Hi, Mr. McKenna. How are you?
Hey, Lily. Good.
Hi. So I am a part of the macroeconomics class, but I thought of this question prior to you announcing that. Based on what's happened this past year, how have the priorities for conquering these pharma challenges changed?
In terms of those sort of intransigent challenges that I laid out, the sort of the four, like patient drop off, et cetera.
Yeah, how have the priorities for kind of overcoming those challenges changed based on what's changed the last year for everyone?
Yeah, so if I interpret it right, so like last year, obviously this pandemic has been brutal on the world. I think if anything, it's taught us that innovation can be a great solution. If we add up the trillions of dollars of economic activity that have been lost because of the pandemic, it looks like had we invested, I think probably $3 to $5 billion to have a vaccine ready would have been probably a good investment. And there's a great podcast that I like very much that's economically driven, the Freakonomics podcast. And they had the Moderna chief medical officer on there. And he basically said that for about $50 billion, that company could basically have vaccines for almost every viral threat to the world economy.
Wow.
And I think that's a drop in the bucket for a big country or a coalition of countries. So I'd like to think that prevention and preparation, the lesson that we've learned from the pandemic, has kind of really resonated with people. And then prioritization. I don't think America is ready for a one big sort of government system of managing healthcare. But some type of framework for acute care. The complexities that COVID patients have, getting tested, finding a hospital. There has to be a tier of sort of national capability for emergency.
Right.
So we'll see what maybe what the Democrats can do on that.
Great. Well, thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Yeah, my pleasure.
Thank you, Lily. Great question. Next, David Holland has a question. Dave, can you turn your camera on?
It says you cannot start your video because the host has stopped it.
Oh, hold on. Let's try again. Okay, go ahead.
Hi, my name is David Holland.
Hey, David.
So I got a question. So for pharmaceutical drugs, do you think the U.S. having a long patent system helps increase further advancement innovation, because of long R&D research costs, or do you think it should be shortened?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. For sure, when companies are doing the math in terms of pursuing a potential drug for a small patient pool, the length of the patent matters. So if there's only sort of a 5 or 6 year patent, it tends to start when you file the idea or from the clinical. And so if the clinicals get delayed, you might only have like really short commercial marketing life. So for sure, it helps sort of underwrite the risk of the development cycle. There's no doubt about that. Now, in terms of how it contrasts country by country, they're more or less gravitated to this sort of 18-year, but you have only sort of an effective marketing life of usually about 10 by the time it's all done. So the protection by patent for sure encourages the innovation cycle. There's no doubt about that.
Awesome. Good question, Dave. Nicole, you're up next, so you can turn your camera on.
Hi, I'm a sophomore honors student at FCU, and I just have a quick question. I'm a hospitality major. Is it possible for me to work in finance or anything business related at a pharmaceutical company?
I think everything's possible. Like what's the focus of your study?
I'm hospitality, but I want to go into marketing or HR.
Okay, well, for sure, we've got a lot of marketers, and we've got a pretty strong HR function. So, in terms of what people study and then what they end up doing as a career, it's usually a lot different than you think. So I think the academic part of your life, never ends, but the undergrad piece is about learning to think, take on new knowledge, exposed to new areas of thinking. I for one learned a ton from working, and I know more about science and operations than I ever learned at school. So you find a way to bring a skill set to an entry-level role or an internal assignment, and you get a lot of on-the-job development. So I would say yes, it is possible, very possible.
Thank you.
And Nicole, switch your major. Come on over to Silberman.
There you go.
I transferred, so it's my second semester. It's my second year, but I want to go for my MBA in marketing.
Awesome.
Yeah, actually, you would argue that I don't think the pharma industry is that great at marketing, so we could probably use some marketing talent.
Absolutely. Thank you, Nicole. Great question. Anybody have any other questions? Well, I'll give you a minute to think. Ken Betts actually texted me a question. Ken's question is, how working remotely will work change things, and what will the future look like?
Yeah, I think it will change things. So earlier on, our CEO Voss indicated that he wanted to leave it open for people to decide where they wanted to work. So you just sort of inform your boss, your supervisor, that I'd like to work from home. So I think we'll probably end up, when we get back in the office, which I'm sort of anticipating to be sort of late summer, fall, we're having discussions among my team about, what do we think the right amount of in-office would be. And I think we'll probably just gravitate to probably like a 50-50, that if people want to work from home, they should, and that taking the commute time and all the logistical anguish out of New Jersey, New York traffic is a big plus for people, especially with families, especially young children. And then for important face-to-face events and discussions where we think that would be beneficial, we sort of gravitate to the site for that. And we're even shrinking our site to support that, make it more activity-based and kind of collegial. So I think it's a permanent change.
Great. Awesome. Thank you. Alex has a question. Alex, can you turn your camera on and ask John the question?
It says that oh no, I got it now. All right. Hi. I just wanted to know, what's the most difficult decision you've had to make in your profession?
It's a difficult question. You know, we've closed a bunch of factories over the years. That's always really difficult. You know, the portfolio in pharmaceuticals being what it is, you understand, it's like you might develop a medicine or two or three and be, you know, have a huge portfolio in cardiovascular medicine. And then if you don't continually reinvent medicine in that space, you might not need a factory anymore. And so just the life cycle of development and of technology, it has some casualties, right? It's just not a predictable supply chain. So, you know, that's really difficult. Having to kind of walk away from certain medicines as well that you might believe in, but maybe the market's not ready, or maybe the payers are not supportive. So that's also difficult. At some point you have to say, you know, can we be successful with this? Yes or no. And you either like, you know, divest it or maybe sell it to somebody else. So the scientists especially get extremely committed to the projects they work on. So not life or death, but you know, difficult ones for sure.
Yeah, I can imagine. I mean, you probably put a lot of like time and effort into it, and then we have to make the decision to kill on it, and it's to pull the kill switch on it. And
yeah, the scientists are, it's like they're babies, right? So I have a really good story. I was at AstraZeneca, and they have a cancer medication called Lynparza, and this development team worked on this for 6 or 8 years, and it failed the final clinical, and so they abandoned the drug. And this scientist would not let go, and ended up reanalyzing the data for another 2 years, and found that for a certain pool of patients that had this specific genetic mutation, the drug was highly effective. So they refiled based on that genetic mutation. The patient pool is really small, and they're saving, you know, women's lives now. The BRCA mutation, it was made famous by Angelina Jolie. You know, she had that double mastectomy because she had that mutation. So you want them to fight and not give up as well.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Alex. Jasmine would like to ask a question. Jasmine, can you turn your camera on?
Hi, John. Thank you so much for speaking with us tonight.
Thanks, Jasmine.
I'm also part of the macroeconomics class. I was wondering, given your extensive career journey and your path and the different stops you've made, what is the biggest thing that you learned that you wish more people knew about, whether it be about finance or anything particular you learned?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So I would say from a career standpoint, to not be afraid of being uncomfortable was the number one thing. You know, I don't want to give people life advice, but to see opportunity and not be limited geographically, I think is a big one. A lot of people grow up, get a job, really love the idea of, you know, got my dream house with the fence and the kids and the dog and things. And I like that too. And it's disruptive to move. It really is. But, you know, the experiencing new people, new conditions, and sort of testing yourself in a brand new culture or environment has just been really energizing for me. So it's not really finance, it's more life, right? So
that's wonderful.
And that's great advice. I could not agree more. Great advice. Mark would like to ask another question. So Mark, you could turn your camera on.
Hey, so I have another question. May I go into the details of what potential changes you might see under Biden's Medicare plan?
Yeah, so I think there's a likelihood that they'll lower the age. Just to kind of, so like the issue in the US is there's still, I think, 20 or 30 million people that don't have coverage. And I think the pandemic has exacerbated that a little bit. So on the one hand, most of the job losses and furloughs are with people that didn't have benefits to begin with, which is unfortunate, obviously. But that's a group of people that really don't have access to care. So I think you'll see sort of an expansion of the sort of the bottom and expansion of the top, and probably more government payment. So right now, I think 42% of people's healthcare is paid by the government, which I don't think people really recognize because there's a lot of political debate about socialized medicine and all that stuff. That's a big chunk of American patients that are getting paid for by the government already. So it's not really a debate about is the government involved in healthcare. They're clearly involved in healthcare. So I think just an expansion of the roster.
So do you think it might be beneficial for pharmaceutical companies?
I think for certain drugs, I think for the generics business, for sure, more people getting treated is good. We have a cardiovascular drug Entresto, which is like, I think it's like a $2,000 a year. And a lot of people with acute heart failure risk should be on that drug and are not. And so if there are more people covered, like the government business is a big source for that drug. I think it would be beneficial for patients as well as for us. Eventually somebody's got to pay for everything that, I forgot the name of your colleague that said, for the really expensive sort of therapies. So there'll be for sure pressure on that. But I think the more people that have access to medicine, the better. We'll figure out the economics.
Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Mark.
Great question.
He said there's a question in the chat. Do you want to read it? You're on mute.
Sorry. John, what were your stepping stones to land your first major role within a company?
Yeah, interesting. So, I had like a normal start like anybody. Started as an analyst, and I think, again, I mentioned have a good boss, somebody that's willing to sort of give you responsibility and not just turn you into somebody that's like handing off work, and to get some accountability early, really sort of teaches you your own capabilities, what you can do. So getting an entry point is obviously pretty difficult. A high quality company is really a big asset. So work hard, try for internships. Everybody's sort of starting from the same starting point. High quality company that will invest in people. When I moved from automotive to pharma, I was shocked at how much more resources pharma had for investing in people. It was incredible. So pick an industry that's got an appropriate sort of tailwind as well, if you can. So great industry, good sector, boss or team, and then they're going to give you the opportunity to sort of shine and show what you can do.
Thank you.
Absolutely. I could not agree anymore. I have a question.
Sure.
What's next? I see a Professor McKenna in your future, but what's next?
Yeah, not so sure. I'm still really enjoy the role. So it's not that I'm, itching to do anything different. I've also, I've sort of chosen a path where I didn't pursue sort of the public company CFO path, which a lot of my sort of peers have done. It's an option, like a smaller company, maybe. I do like academics, and I think Mary knows I'm pursuing my doctorate, and but 2/3 through that. But I'm not so sure I want to be sort of full-time teaching or anything like that. But I would like to do something maybe part-time. I think having conversations with younger people, students, I really enjoy it. I know everybody on the finance team in Novartis, regardless of what role they're in and, what their career aspirations are. And even though the world's way different and the future is much different the next 30 years than the last 30 years, there's some sort of tried and true principles that we can share. And I'm so lucky to have some really great mentors and bosses along the way. So I feel a real obligation to help there as well. So pretty enthusiastic with what I'm doing now, but want to keep learning as well.
Awesome. Well, I definitely see Professor McKenna in your future, and we'd love to have you at FDU. Awesome. So thank you so much, John. That was fabulous. That was really terrific. Students, any last minute questions? Otherwise, we're going to let John go and we're going to spin the wheel.
Spin the wheel. Anybody ever has any follow-ups? I'm happy to, take an email or a follow-up. Really want to encourage that.
Oh, thank you. It's okay if I share your email?
Yeah, anytime.
Well, awesome. That's terrific. And of course, they can connect with you on LinkedIn, I'm sure.
Absolutely.
Great. Well, again, thank you so much. We really appreciate all your time, and this was just fabulous.
Yeah, my pleasure, and best of luck for the rest of the semester with everybody, and stay safe.
Thanks. And hopefully I'll see you when you're back in Jersey.